Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Good morning and welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast. My name is Bart Warner. I have the privilege of serving as the town manager of Bedford, and this program is developed to keep our citizens, businesses, and interested parties informed of the goings-on of your local town government. Something we present the day after a council meeting. Those occur on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month. And since it's Wednesday morning, the 14th, that means we had one last night on the 13th. Before the council meeting started at 7 p.m., the council members got together for a work session to review the terms of service and procedures related to our electric utility. We do have rules that we run our businesses by and that guide us. So in case problems come up, we can head those off, or we can seek a policy reference to make sure we resolve those appropriately. The current terms and conditions of service that have been in place that we've been using were first adopted on February 1st, 1996. So staff and council thought it was a good idea to revisit that, and mainly at the leading effort of Ann Cantrell, our finance director, and John Wagner, our electric director, they presented an 18-page document to kind of update and tighten up some things for council's review. Spent the better part of an hour going through that, talking about various things. The focus is to make sure we meet our charges of efficiency and economy, but we also want to make sure that we provide excellent customer service. So that was the detail of that discussion. As was mentioned later, and I'll point this out, occasionally council will have a work session prior to council meetings to really take a deep dive into certain issues. Last night's topic, again, was the way we run our electric utility and a lot of the ways we interact with our customers. Previous discussions recently have centered on parks, their purpose, their costs, and how they function in our budget, and also town-owned properties. So those are announced as part of regular meetings. Typically, we will adjourn a meeting and mention that we're adjourning it to another date for a work session. So that's the best way to get that information. They're open to the public. They're typically held in the council chambers, a lot more informal than the council meeting. So if you do happen to show up, and again, we certainly encourage you to do so, just understand that it's a casual discussion amongst council members and staff. Once that was concluded, we got into our regular meeting, which commenced at 7 o'clock p.m., and I'll begin by just kind of working my way through the agenda for that. There are certain things we do pretty much at every meeting, certain administrative tasks, and that usually begins with approval of the minutes of the previous council meetings, which took place last night. I am given an opportunity to report to council and to the public at these meetings. Given the large agenda and the opportunities for public input last night, I did not have anything specific to report and deferred that time for other purposes. We did have a couple of people sign up to speak before council in our appearances before council section. The first was a gentleman who's a pastor in the community, and I did not clearly understand his last name, so I'm going to apologize to him and listeners in advance. I believe it was Dave Meyer, but I did not get that information prior to recording this podcast. But Pastor Meyer offered a prayer for council based on the scripture from Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5, basically, which says, rely on the Lord's judgment more than your own, which is probably good advice for all of us all the time. The next speaker was Miss Susan Kirby, who's a resident of Watson Place. She shared several concerns about the condition of parks in town, and particularly Liberty Lake Park. Her observation is that the park is heavily used, and she noted particularly the presence of some portable toilet facilities there throughout the park that she shared her view were not particularly effective, and she does not have a favorable view in general of those. For those of you who may not know Susan, she's been very active in the community and know that she formerly served on the Bedford County School Board. She also did state that she was not there simply to complain, but she wanted to offer a solution. And one of the concerns relates to the presence of the police department at the former community building at Liberty Lake Park. For those of you who may not know, we do have a space issue with our PD who are in the basement of the municipal building. We talked in great detail about the possibility of constructing a new police station at the corner of Plunkett Street and Court Street, which is a vacant lot owned by the town. I'm going to go off on a bit of a segue here and note that project is not proceeding. Council did spend several years in discussions with Wiley Wilson and spent quite a bit of money on some design documents, but ultimately decided not to pursue that activity. And that contract with Wiley and Wilson has been canceled. So just mentioning that for the benefit of information to the public. Ms. Kirby, speaking to that action where we put the police department out there and we're in the process of putting our detectives in that building, shared her disagreement with that decision, that she remembers when it was utilized as a community building and it also had a bathroom and water fountain facility that were available to the public. Those have been discontinued due to the security needs of the police department. Ms. Kirby suggested that we think of another solution for the police department space, and she suggested the possibility of the town relocating its administrative staff to the Burke Scott building that is currently owned by Bedford County. Basically, Ms. Kirby also noted her view that any lack of attention to the parks ultimately has negative impact on the children of the community, and she requested that council take that into consideration. The next speaker was Zach Everson, who lives in Lynchburg, but noted that he is a tennis player and played tennis for Miss Kirby, as a matter of fact. He noted some concerns he had specifically about the tennis courts there, one of which was, and this is a good point, we do have lights on the tennis court, but there is a sign that says the park is closed at dusk. Mr. Everson noted that he'd been there a couple of times after dark and had some unpleasant, in his experience, interactions with the police department regarding that policy. And frankly, the fact that there might be a bit of a conundrum in terms of having a park that's closed at dusk, but having lighted facilities. That's more of an editorial comment on my part, and I noted that with the town attorney as Mr. Everson was speaking. He also noted his concerns about the bathroom facilities and that the portable toilets were not an optimal solution in his mind, and basically shared his view that he would like for council to give greater attention to the parks in general. Moving on, we had council comments, and that's when they go around the dais and every council member is given an opportunity to speak on pretty much any topic that's on their mind. We began last night with Councilman Jay Ippolito, who noted that he really appreciated the attendees who showed up in person for the meeting, particularly coming out in the rain, and he appreciates the input they provide. Councilman Stacey Haley also expressed his appreciation for folks who participated directly and were physically present. Mr. Haley noted that council has been having some very significant discussions about parks, and noted the work sessions, and again, that's why I mentioned that previously. Councilman Haley also encouraged people who are interested to attend the work sessions when they're announced so they can witness firsthand the specifics of those discussions. Vice Mayor Darrell Updike also thanked everyone who was in attendance. He also thanked Ms. Kirby particularly, but all others who provide input at those meetings. And Darrell basically said that council members really value that. In fact, they are desperate to hear input from the public at any given time. Vice Mayor Updike also personally recognized police officer Travis Thomas. He observed him working at a potato collection event in town recently. Further information coming from staff related to that was that Travis participated in something that also included the Society of St. Andrews, which is a nonprofit organization in the community that focuses on gleaning and hunger prevention activities. Councilman Dwight Evans, again, thanked everyone for coming out in the rain, thanked the pastor for offering the prayer for council. He shared his view that he's visited Liberty Lake Park many times and noted that he has received several compliments about the park and the fact that it's a large facility that is available, but he does appreciate the comments from people who are offering ideas for improvement. Councilman Dave Foster noted that Habitat for Humanity has been reactivated within town limits. On June 28th and 29th, that organization is hosting a Blitz Build event, and he's glad to see that they are active in town again. Mayor Stanley concluded the council comments, also thanked people for coming out directly, acknowledged his view that Liberty Lake Park needs improvement. He did point out that there have been some operational changes in our recreation operations, notably the fact that the town is no longer actively involved in the provision of recreation services. And CG noted that despite the fact that action and that decision took place about 12 years ago, there's still a lot of apparent confusion in town among citizens about that. He noted that he remembers the level of service that was previously provided by the city recreation department, but noted that that was a level of service that was discontinued for a reason at the time and is not likely to come back. He also noted that in addition to Liberty Lake Park, the town owns several properties and other parks that need attention as well, but noted council's commitment to continue to discuss these matters. The next item on the agenda was a report of council committees. Vice Mayor Updike, who's chair of the Finance Committee, reported that group met last week to review the quarterly statements representing the financial activities of the town. Darrell shared his view that the town seems to be headed in the right direction in terms of its financial position. In particular, we will be debt-free in the upcoming budget cycles, and we are making active plans to address the loss of $750,000 in revenue that will take place in 3 years. And again, that's something that we've spoken about before, but it's a very large issue for the town in particular in its operations. As part of the city's reversion to town status that was effective in 2013, there was extra money that Bedford County received based on the calculation of state aid in the composite index. I would certainly encourage you to Google that if you're interested in further detail, because frankly, I don't know that I can explain it in a more meaningful way at this point. But essentially, there was an incentive for the city to revert in which the county received additional funding for a period of 15 years, beginning in 2013. That amount varies based on certain budget considerations, but it's about $6 million a year, and it's geared toward schools. But the way that works is the money goes to the Board of Supervisors, then they determine how best to parcel that out. And they've been doing that continuously since 2013. As part of the agreement between the city and the county, the town receives a portion of that funding. And the town's portion, it happens to be $750,000 a year, which we have received every year from beginning in 2013. But that goes away in 2028, and that is spelled out in the voluntary settlement agreement. We have been trying to anticipate ways in which we can absorb that loss of revenue for many years. That's a big part of our budget discussion, which we'll touch on that here more in just a minute. But ultimately, we know that in 2028, there's a $750,000 hole that we need to plug. Rather than simply wait until that happens, council and staff have been taking proactive actions, and a lot of what we're proposing in the fiscal year 25-26 budget is to get ahead of that issue. And so that's the explanation behind Vice Mayor Updike's mention of that in the Finance Committee. Moving on to the rest of the agenda, we had 4 separate public hearings scheduled, the first of which dealt with the proposed budget for fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2025, and running till June 30th, 2026. There are a few changes that are upcoming in that budget. One of the most significant operationally for us is the town is proposing to get out of the commercial solid waste collection service. Important note there is that just pertains to commercial service, not residential. If you participate in the town's residential solid waste collection, that's going to continue. There will be no change to that, and there is no proposed change in the fee for that. However, there are about 190 customers who receive commercial collection service for us, and based on several considerations, including the cost of that, the town has determined that it's better for the community for us to withdraw and step back from that business. We do actually compete with private providers who, candidly, in our analysis, can probably provide that at a lower cost to citizens. So one of the proposals in the budget is to step back from provision of that service. In addition to that efficiency and cost perspective for our customers, there's also the fact that we think that will ultimately net a savings for the town, ultimately of about $200,000, which applies to our efforts to recover $750,000 overall. So that's been a major discussion as part of this budget, and it wasn't a decision that's being considered lightly. Another thing we're doing, which they took action on this, and there's a separate public hearing, was to expand the use of the B poll tax to make that applicable to more businesses. But we'll touch on that in just a second. Interestingly enough, there were no speakers on the public hearing related to the budget. We then moved on to the next public hearing, which related to the Business Professional and Occupational License, or B poll tax, for tax year 2026. The town, again, as part of the budget proposal, is planning to expand the applicability of that tax. Up until this point in the current fiscal year, that tax is paid by businesses mainly who have gross receipts in excess of $2 million. That is being expanded to include businesses with gross receipts of $250,000, beginning with the next taxable year. One thing to note is this is a tax that is charged by most localities in our area. The rates that we charge are lower than what our neighbors tend to charge. For businesses of $250,000 and below, we charge a rate of 10 cents per $100 of gross receipts, or that's the proposal. Businesses of $2 million or more would pay 15 cents per $100 in gross receipts. We are aware that our neighboring jurisdictions who charge that tax actually do so at an average rate of 20 cents. So we're expanding that. It will apply to more people, but we are trying to maintain some sense of competitiveness within the greater market and sensitivity to the fact that this will be an increased cost. Similar to the budget public hearing, no one spoke to this as well. So that public hearing was closed. And we then moved on to a public hearing related to a request from the Bedford Pregnancy Center for tax exempt status as it pertains to real estate taxation. The request is made pursuant to a section of Virginia code that allows towns to grant certain exemptions based on certain considerations. Public hearing obviously is part of that process. Lori Lewis, who is the executive director of the Bedford Pregnancy Center, spoke. She advised that the center has been there for a few years and provides support services to families, and particularly women who are having questions about pregnancy, and they provide support services such as counseling, pregnancy tests, and also supplies such as diapers for care of infants. She noted that they recently opened up a clinic for ultrasound services as well. Ms. Lewis was the only speaker for that public hearing, and the hearing was subsequently closed. And we moved on to our final public hearing of the evening, which related to a request for a conditional use permit for a bed and breakfast lodging facility to be located at 808 Longwood Avenue. The applicant for that is Ms. Ann Lusk. There were no people who rose to speak to that issue. So that public hearing was also closed, and then we moved into the next part of our agenda, which is the consent agenda, and that typically relates to things that are administrative functions of the town council that are their particular purview. Often it relates to special events. That was the case last night. The first item of business on the consent agenda was a proposal from the Bedford County Fair, LLC, who are planning an event on August 22nd, 23rd, and 24th at Liberty Lake Park. That we have a process by which we evaluate all special events requests, particularly as it relates to our facilities. Bedford County Fair, LLC, interestingly enough, and I didn't know this until I dealt with them directly, is a nonprofit organization. We thought that there was a direct connection to the Bedford County government or the activities or organizations associated with Bedford County government, but that is not the case. This is the Bedford County Fair that has been held in various locations around the county in recent years. They did come to us and request to host that at Liberty Lake Park this time from August 22nd through 24th. Since that essentially involves both our special events policy as well as kind of closure for the normal public use of the park, it has to go before council. On a motion made by Councilman Haley, seconded by Councilman Evans, council did approve the Bedford County Fair to hold their event on August 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. One thing I'll note is that the specific event title in the application was Bedford Town Carnival, but make no mistake, it is the Bedford County Fair, and council expressed in their discussions the fact that they're happy to host this as part of the county. So it is the Bedford County Fair that you're used to. This year it will be held within town limits. Of course, the town is certainly part of the county, and we value that relationship and our interaction, and certainly don't want there to be any confusion about that. As part of that approval process, Jonathan Hayden, who's one of the event sponsors, did answer a few questions. A lot of those pertain to shuttle service and parking. The next item on the consent agenda was a request from the Boys of Bedford, LLC. This is a group of filmmakers who are planning to film a short film on the Bedford Boys on August 1st and 2nd from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. at Liberty Lake Park. Now, this means that the park will effectively be closed to the public on Friday, August 1st, and Saturday, August 2nd, so these folks can do what it is they're doing to make their film. And that was part of the discussion and review of this project. On a motion by Councilman Haley, seconded by Councilman J. Ippolito, council voted unanimously to approve that. I do need to check myself here for just a moment and note that Councilman Todd Foreman was not present at the meeting due to work obligations on his part. So when I say that these things were approved unanimously, actually it was 6 members voting in favor, 1 member absent. So apologize for any confusion about Robert's Rules of Order or parliamentary procedure. The first item of new business was an ordinance establishing the Business Professional and Occupational License, or BPOL, tax for calendar year 2026. As I mentioned, the town is looking to expand the applicability of that tax. Little history is in order here. When the city reverted to a town, there actually was a tax holiday. This was a tax that the city had collected every year prior to reversion. When the change to town status was first implemented, there were several changes also related to operations and budgeting, and council at that time decided to offer a holiday for that particular tax. And that tax was not collected for about 10 years. Now, again, looking forward to the fact that we will be short about $750,000 in revenue. A couple of years ago, we talked about ways to kind of recover that cost, and that tax was re-implemented a couple of years ago. It was first applied to businesses with gross receipts of $3 million or above. Last year, that was expanded to capture businesses $2 million and above. And this year's proposal is to expand it further to make it applicable to businesses with gross receipts of $250,000 and above. We anticipate that this is probably the final implementation of the BPOL at that level. Our projections are that this gets us further along to recapturing some of that revenue that we have to replace. And so that was the discussion that council had and why this action is being taken place. On a motion by Vice Mayor Updike and seconded by Councilman Evans, that motion to expand the BPOL tax, as we just talked about, was approved with 6 members voting in favor and 1 member absent. The next item of new business was the request for tax exemption from the Bedford Pregnancy Center. The town has the right to grant exemption to certain properties from taxation by designation under the Virginia Code, but there's a specific process that we have to go through, and we have to evaluate 8 different criteria. I'm not going to walk through those as part of this podcast. Again, would encourage you to go back and watch the video broadcast and the recording on YouTube. But we did go through those and mention the relevant legal requirements. On a motion by Councilman Stacey Haley, seconded by Councilman Jay Ippolito, council did vote 6 members voting in favor, 1 member absent, to approve tax exemption from the real estate tax for the Bedford Pregnancy Center on East Main Street. The next item of new business was a consideration of a conditional use permit for the bed and breakfast proposed at 808 Longwood Avenue. This was something that was reviewed first by the Planning Commission back on April 3rd. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of that. And on a motion by Vice Mayor Updike, seconded by Councilman Foster, the conditional use permit for the bed and breakfast at 808 Longwood Avenue was approved by a vote of 4-2 with 1 member absent. The members voting in favor were Councilman Evans, Councilman Foster, Mayor Stanley, and Vice Mayor Updike, whereas Councilman Haley and Councilman Ippolito voted against granting the conditional use permit. Ultimately, the permit was approved. The next item of new business related to some accounting work we have to do related to our lease of vehicles for the police department and the community development department. Some folks may or may not know that the town entered into an agreement with Enterprise Rent-A-Car after going through the appropriate procurement process, whereby we now lease quite a few of the vehicles used for patrol by the police department, as well as other vehicle needs in the town. The arrangement for that's pretty interesting, in addition to the fact that we keep vehicles that are in better repair, whereas back when we used to buy them, we tended to run the wheels off of them in many cases. Staff benefits from getting better equipment that is easier and better to maintain. Also, Enterprise manages a robust resale process related to those, and as part of our agreement, we get a portion of those proceeds. So in addition to the fact that we've reduced our costs for capital for buying new vehicles and also for maintenance, we are at a point in that arrangement where we're seeing some revenue. The issue last night related to some Government Accounting Standards Bureau requirements for accounting reporting, and council had to make a budget amendment to make sure that we appropriately report the revenues that we receive for that program on the accounting ledgers. Basically, this was something that's handled by our finance director, Ann Cantrell, who, in addition to her many marvelous qualifications, is a certified public accountant, so she was able to explain any questions that council had. On a motion by Councilman Haley, seconded by Vice Mayor Updike, that motion to approve the budget amendments required by GASB for accounting purposes was approved, 6 members voting in favor, 1 member absent. Next item of new business was readopting and reenacting code provisions dealing with traffic laws. This is something that we have to do every year according to the Code of Virginia to make sure that Basically, the town recovers the revenues when it has to enforce certain traffic laws, such as speeding and parking violations. Again, Virginia government is an interesting creature in that everything local governments can and are able or ever consider doing has to be approved and specifically authorized by state law. Part of that relationship is, again, if we enforce laws and we do not specifically say that we intend to collect the revenues associated with fines, then that money goes to the state. So every year we adopt an ordinance saying that we're going to do that if we write you a speeding ticket, that money will stay in the town coffers. Otherwise, it goes directly to the state. Councilman Evans moved to approve the readoption of these code provisions. That was seconded by Councilman Haley. That vote was carried by unanimous consent of all members present, 6 members voting for, 1 member absent. The final item of new business was a resolution for Business Appreciation Month. The month of May 2025 has been designated as Business Appreciation Month in Virginia in recognition of the many benefits to Virginia communities derived from their businesses. And in appreciation of our industry, small towns, and entrepreneurs, Council adopted a resolution in support of that month. I read that resolution out loud last night, but I'll spare you who are listening right now from hearing that again. Would encourage you to check out the recording of the meeting on youtube.com. That concluded all the business last night. Again, it was a pretty robust agenda compared to the normal workload for council. We meet, as I mentioned, on the second and fourth Tuesday of every month at 7 p.m. at 215 East Main Street. We would love to have people come by anytime. We do have opportunities for people to speak and share information. The council meetings, again, are when all official action is taken. So if you ever have any questions about what the town's doing, or you hear a rumor, nothing happens outside of the council meetings from a legal perspective. So if you can join us on the second and fourth Tuesdays at 7 p.m. every month, we're happy to have you. The only exception is on the rare occasion that we don't have any items of new business or any pressing matters of public business. On those occasions, sometimes those meetings will be canceled, but we will certainly provide appropriate notice. You can find that on our website, www.bedfordva.gov, or through our social media outlets managed by our capable partners at mediasquatch.com, who also help us present this podcast. If you can't come to the meeting, those meetings are also live streamed. So we ask you to check through our Facebook page, which is probably the best direct source of that. I think you can also watch the live stream on YouTube. Woody's nodding at me, so I'm not saying anything wrong. That's good. And also, again, if you can't catch it live, can't watch the stream, the videos are posted to youtube.com. Last night's meeting is already up there. I did watch it in an attempt to see if I could glean the pastor's name. And again, I apologize if I got that wrong and hope somebody will correct me. But also, the approved minutes of every meeting are posted on our website, www.bedfordva.gov. If you'll click on the government tab and go to documents, that gives you a list of every meeting, not just town council, but also groups such as the Planning Commission and the Redevelopment and Housing Authority. So we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to provide the most pertinent and relevant and correct information possible. If there's something that we're missing, if you have a suggestion or a comment, please feel free to reach out to us directly. You can call during business hours at Town Hall, 540-587-6001. If you want to email me directly, again, my name is Bart Warner. My email is bwarner@bedfordva.gov. And again, we all feel very privileged to be a part of this community and to serve it. On kind of an editorial note to end, I'll note that we are in a period of change in our community. It's pretty obvious with a lot of the construction activity we see ongoing. But it's also an exciting time. While we enjoy the company of the folks who've been here for many generations and all that they've contributed here, we also are seeing more new neighbors show up on the streets and in our stores. And, you know, my experience in Bedford fashion is folks have been pretty welcoming and friendly, in all cases. And so would encourage you to continue to extend that spirit to all residents, both new and historic. And also, when I arrived here, I noted that our sponsor, Mr. Woody Watts, and Media Squatch were noted and recognized by our Chamber of Commerce. Media Squatch received a business award from the Chamber of Commerce, and Woody himself received identification as the best boss in Bedford, which is probably pretty darn accurate. So wanted to give a shout out to our hosts. We really value and appreciate that relationship and for giving us the opportunity to get this information out to you in this form. The next public meeting of council is Tuesday, May 27th. The one thing I know for certain will be on that agenda is adoption of the fiscal year 25-26 budget. Given the lack of input from last night's meeting, I anticipate that will likely be approved with a few changes, but until the actual vote takes place, we won't know that, so encourage people to stay tuned. We'll be back the day after that to report back to you. Till then, enjoy the spring weather and all that entails. Hopefully that's the right level of dry and or sunny and or whatever else meets your needs. Till then, thank you very much and tune in next time.